Getting into different phases of experimental music can lead to many different rabbit holes, not necessarily ones where the content is particularly disturbing, but the sound or the way they're being put together can give the impression of something challenging, something that is not that easy to digest all at once. I believe that one of those albums that succeeds on being so many different things at once from a project I've never heard being mentioned beforehand is with the album Bad Karma by Illusion of Safety. It seems that this is a project mainly consisting of Dan Burke, and throughout the years many different artists have been part of this project, with the biggest and most notable one being Jim O'Rourke. When it comes to this album, there's not really any information about it other than a bass feature on track 13 and that it's been 5 years in the recording process, from 1990 to 1995. Other than that, you get a great dark collage artwork in the layout, and that's pretty much it. Listening to some of the more recent works from Illusion of Safety, all I got was some pretty mediocre dark ambient that really had nothing to write home about. I can't really remember how this album got into my hands. I believe it was a birthday present, and getting into it having no idea what to expect, this is actually a great hidden gem from the 90s in the experimental scene. In reflection to the insert, what you mostly get with this album is a sound collage project. It's mostly sampled dialogues and other electronic sounds being put together in a pretty unorthodox way, and also having a lot of sections with a heavy emphasis on dark ambient. The album manages to jump around many different styles and approaches the way it toys around with samples and ambience, with a couple moments giving emphasis on looped sections and others being more abrasive and going into the industrial and noise territory. In a sense, this is an album I can recommend to those who are fans of Nerds with Wound, since you'll find similarities in terms of the weird sound collages, the experimentations in the haunting ambience that is a key factor to a lot of Nerds with Wound albums and also plays a pivotal role in many tracks out of Bad Karma. It also gives a nod to industrial acts such as Coil or early Suicide Commando with the more mechanical approaches that we get in a few select moments. All of those elements and many more being part of a 14-track album that goes for more than an hour manages to make the experience constantly engaging, making for a wacky experimental release that goes places and has quite a few things to unpack. One of the things that I find really nice about this album is how most of the tracks over here seemingly flow one to each other. It feels like one continuous theme at times that constantly changes and has those sporadic abrasive moments that are attention grabbing, but it still feels more like it's separated to 3 or 4 large sections rather than 14 tracks, which also range in terms of duration, with some of them going for only like 2 minutes and others getting close to the 7-minute mark. In any case, the way these sound collages are pieced together in order to make for a collective piece that flows smoothly rather than a bunch of random ideas being separated with distinct cuts is what I consider one of the most interesting aspects in regards to the pacing of this album. Right off the bat, we start things on a really strong note with the intense introduction that is fuck reality. In an instant, you get bombarded with so many sounds coming together, dialogues being looped, and lots of intense glitchy cuts and textures that border into noise territory. It's one of the most abrasive moments in the album, and we don't really get a lot of moments that reach that level of intensity and wacky experimentation as we move on to more minimal sections and a bigger focus on dark atmosphere. Even fuck reality itself doesn't keep the momentum of noise for more than half of its short length, as the second side mostly consists of the sound of a clock ticking fast alongside some monotone ambience, creating an anxiety-inducing soundscape. Transitioning into Sam, this is another short track that mostly consists of samples being glued together that feel like they come from a protest or something. It's a disorienting image that gets the job done on showcasing what the album is about and making it a bit more clear what it's aiming for. But the next track, Pecking Order, shifts things a bit, being one of the few straightforward industrial moments that I mentioned at the beginning. With the usage of a minimal and repetitive beat, this is the first moment in the album where we get something rhythmic. The whole vibe and sound is really what you would expect out of an industrial track in the 90s. Its small change-ups are enough to keep the momentum going, and it does sound like something you would get out of a chase sequence in a PlayStation 2 game like Manhunt or something, which I really like. Definitely one of the highlights out of the album for being able to provide something different and also having some great surrounding sounds outside of the beat. Leading to Shadowplay, we get the most minimal moment in the album so far. It contains some really nice ambience that loops itself over and over, and as it progresses, it introduces more looped samples, making the whole experience all the more chaotic and intense, only to be interrupted by the start of the next song, Bad Carnival Acid, that starts in total silence. After almost 1.5 minutes, it jump scares you with a subtle but effective noise explosion, and then it's back again to the bizarre and unsettling territory of looped samples, where in this one it feels like it's a carnival happening in the distance, and then some other upfront sounds that come and go. Limerence is another moment that doesn't really provide all that much in terms of its content, as it mostly consists of what feels like samples from a documentary or something, talking about a too affectionate priest in a school. It only lasts for less than 2 minutes, so it's just a little interesting detour, adding a bit to the more disturbing side of the album. Extreme State of Fear is the one track that probably contains the most sickening speech samples about kidnappers and how and where they lure kids. Sounds like something that could be part out of Buyer's Market by Peter Sotos, and alongside that we just get a monotone drone pattern that is effective on making the atmosphere around it even more haunting. Quick Fix is a short and simple idea, but for me at least, this might be some of the best usage of loops out of this entire album. It's kinda hard to wrap your head around what's going on. At first it feels like you hear some kids in the distance, and then the main loop gets a bit louder, which is like oinking sounds. Whatever it is, it's pretty unsettling, and then smoothly transitions into Immanent that adds layers of electronics, dark ambience and sounds of junk, reinforcing the feeling of unsettling nature even with the slow absence of the previous loop and progressively making the scenes become more distorted, only for it to abruptly cut into silence the moment it feels like getting more and more intense. In 110 Countries is one of the most sample-rich tracks in the album that blends with some haunting strings. This track with its themes and approach to sound reminds me out of something you could get in a proper goal album, dark, gritty but also kinda soothing. With Speed, Brutality, Honesty is where we get the most standout moment in the album in my opinion, but that might not be for a good reason for some of you. Even if I would have long gaps listening to this album, the main thing that I would remember is this track right here being a thing, because this right here is 8 minutes of an ear-piercing high frequency being played non-stop. And it might sound a bit annoying at first, but as it goes on, it gets louder and louder, becoming progressively more torturous. Understandably so, this can be for some of you the most challenging moment to get through this album. It's even interesting how the sample itself with the speech at the beginning and the end describes forms of torture in order to get information, as it's being directed to the listener who gets to succumb to an ear-piercing high frequency being played for the track that is the longest in length in this whole album. It's a very interesting and bold choice to say the least, which for me further reinforces the challenging and bizarre nature of this album, constantly finding new ways to subvert your expectations, even if it leads to sadistic experimentations such as the one on Speed, Brutality, Honesty. With the instant cut out of the high frequency as we get to the next song, The Doctor Is In, this is the closest where we get something similar to the introduction of this album, with a ton of abrasive cuts, a ton of different collages of sound, and many noise patterns, and this time in a much longer length, although not making for a moment with that much of a substance in my opinion, mainly for how messy it is rather than trying to keep a certain theme in its runtime. Inhuman is the other moment in the track listing similar to Pecking Order, a dynamic repetitive industrial banger that also becomes one of the highlights in this whole album. The false mirror feels mostly just like a serviceable way to end the project after such a wild ride. There's not something all that engaging with its sound other than just another moment that gets progressively louder only for it to be abruptly cut. Probably the weakest moment in the album, but still a pretty solid way to end it regardless. Bad Karma is quite an experience. It's not like it does something particularly wild or out there, but having all of its elements being part in one album is quite something. I believe that in the slew of experimental electronic albums that emerged in the 90s, this is one of those hidden gems that I've seen no one talk about, that is guaranteed to leave an impression on you, whether it's a positive or a negative one. And this is why I consider Bad Karma, by Illusion of Safety, to be, in my opinion, an essential. Let me know your thoughts of this album down in the comments. Leave a like if you enjoyed the video, subscribe for more content like this. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you all in the next video. Goodbye.